Oh, but then black can take our bishop, and we won't have checkmate. Well, but we do. Hey guys, this is Andy from Noctie. Today we're gonna go through the weekly scenario of week 38 of 2025. So this week's scenario comes from the iconic game by Rashid Nezhmetdinov played in 1962 against Oleg Chernikov. So playing white here, Rashid Nezhmetdinov was a very strong and famous Soviet chess player. Although he never became a grandmaster, he's still known today for this famous game. And also, he was a great friend of Mikhail Tal. So let's take a look at this position. What we have here is a position coming from the Sicilian opening. And when we take a look, we see that material is equal. Both sides have the bishop here and a knight, as well as the two rooks and the queen. And if we count the pawns, we see that both sides has 7 pawns each. Although there's a slight imbalance here in that white has a 3 against 2 pawn majority on the queen side, while black has a 5 against 4 on the king side. So here it is white to move, and on their last move, black has played bishop f6, attacking our queen. This position was actually already known in theory at the time, and the consensus was that white didn't have any choice but to go into a move repetition. If white tries to move the queen to a more active square, and that would be, for example, to queen f4 or queen g3, trying to keep the game going. So black here has a very nice tactical trick against that. They can sacrifice the queen temporarily on our knight on c3, and after we capture with a pawn, they can jump in with their knight, forking our king and queen, no matter if our queen goes to f4 or g3. So for that reason, those two squares don't work. So what other options does white have? For example, if white would have gone to g4 or h3, then black can simply gain a tempo on our queen by moving the d pawn. So that wouldn't be good as well. And yeah, apart from that, the only reasonable move thought at the time was simply going back to queen h6. The queen came there before, and then black can play bishop g7 and we'll have a repetition. But here, Rashid Nezhmetdinov went into a long think. Time went by, he thought for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and finally he made a move that stunned the whole chess world and has since then became the golden standard for positional queen sacrifices. So here he played the amazing move, queen takes f6. So yeah, let's take a look at what happens. So here, the natural move for black would be, of course, to capture back the queen with the pawn, and the immediate consequence of that is that white can take the knight here with the bishop. So white would have got 2 minor pieces for the queen. So just purely materially, that isn't enough. But in this position, Rashid Nezhmetdinov had foreseen that the 2 minor pieces that white has gained will totally dominate the position and make it really hard for black to play. Black, on the other hand, also being a very strong master, played a beautiful intermediate move, knight to e2 check. And this move is very important because the black knight will fall anyways. And this move basically wins the tempo for black. So now white must take the knight back, and now then black captures the queen. So here white have wasted a move to play knight takes e2. And here white can continue, of course, to go back to c3, and then with the plan of jumping into the d5 outpost, placing the bishop on d4 and then targeting the f6 pawn. So here black tries to develop, going with the rook to e8, and now black jumps in with the knight, threatening to grab the f6 pawn with a fork. Black, of course, defends it with the rook, and now white simply increases the pressure. So let's take a look at this position. White has 2 minor pieces for the queen, so technically this isn't enough compensation just looking at the material. But white's bishop pair here are so strong, and also we have this amazing knight on d5. together, they're pointing down towards black king, and it's going to be very difficult for black to basically get out of this. All right, let's see. Black moves up the king to defend the f6 pawn, and now white simply brings in the rook. And the idea here is to perhaps go for a rook lift and to increase the pressure on the f6 pawn. So yeah, play continues from here. Black develops, now willing to bring the light squared bishop into play, and white follows through. So the concrete idea here is, of course, going for the f6 pawn. And here we see that white's plan is very simple. It's bringing up the pieces, targeting black's pieces on the king side, and hopefully breaking in. Black develops, and now white has managed to put another piece attacking the f6 pawn. So let's see here for a second. We see that white has 3 pieces targeting f6, while black only has 2 defenders. So up till now, after the queen sacrifice, play has been very straightforward and very logical for white. So now black goes for some counterplay, attacking our rook with the bishop. And here we play a nice intermediate move. We attack the queen first. The queen is forced to go back. And now we capture the pawn on f6. So remember here, when we have compensation and the initiative, material is actually second to that. We should be really focusing on keeping up the attack and keeping the tension. And besides that, the rook here on f1 isn't really doing much. So yeah, we are happy to give it away to black. So let's try to understand why black played this move, bishop e2. So from b5 here, the bishop really could have just captured the f1 rook. But instead, black plays this move to go after the f3 rook. And when we think about it, it actually makes total sense. And that's because the f3 rook, that's the important attacking piece in white's camp. And from f3, the rook is of course supporting the knight here along the f file, and also with the possibility to swing over to the g or h file. So here, let's see what white had in response. Here we have a beautiful discovered check. We move the knight, unleash the bishop to check the king, and here black is actually already lost. Let's see what happened in the game. Black went to g8 because capturing the knight would allow a checkmate with rook h3 followed by rook h8. And yeah, here we can simply go with rook h3 anyways. Now we are threatening, for example, to play knight g5, and then we have this nice mating net going on with the bishop and the rook. Here, black desperately wants to block that, and they are happy to give away the exchange for our dark squared bishop. And should white take it? Well, of course not, because our dark squared bishop is really important in the attack. So instead, we try to drive the rook away with the f-pawn. Now black grabs the f1 rook, and we take back. And here black brings in the other rook to c8, and the idea here is of course not to simply develop the rook, but to sacrifice it for our c3 bishop. Remember, we are still heavily down in material, so white here is relying on the activity and the coordination of the pieces to be able to launch an attack. So black, on the other hand, is willing to sacrifice material if they can neutralize our attack. And yeah, white wisely avoids that, moving the bishop to d4. And now black plays b5. How can white continue the attack? Well, white plays knight g5. And this, of course, attacks the f7 pawn, but also it unleashes the rook to potentially infiltrate along the h file. Let's see what black does here. Black defends the pawn with the rook, but here we actually have a great tactical trick. So feel free to pause for a moment if you want to see what white has in mind here. And of course, white can simply take the f7 pawn with the bishop, because if rook takes back, then we have the nice decoy rook h8. The king goes to capture it, and then we have a knight forking the king, the queen, and the rook. And when black moves the king, we simply pick up the queen. So yeah, in this position, when the dust has settled, we see that white has a completely winning endgame. We have 2 minor pieces against the rook. That is already a advantage. And furthermore, white has 6 pawns against black's 4 pawns. So in addition to the 2 minors versus the rook, white has 2 extra pawns. The game continued for a while here, but Nezhmetdinov didn't have any trouble at all converting this. So we'll stop the analysis here for our purposes, and when we just skip back to the first move, the key idea was this crazy positional queen sacrifice, grabbing the bishop on the f6 square, and then gaining 2 minus for a queen in exchange for lots of compensation and active pieces. So now it's our turn to play against Noctie. Alright, so here we are, and it's our turn now to play this against Noctie. But a quick reminder, even though we have analyzed the idea of the queen sacrifice, it's still a very difficult position to play. And also, even today, the engines aren't really sure about the evaluation. But the consensus should be that white is better, and at least that it's much more easy to play in practice. However, it's a great practice to train our skills of keeping the initiative and creating dynamic play. So here I'm just going to go ahead and grab the bishop on f6. And the first interesting thing is to see if Noctie can find the intermediate move knight e2 check, because that's not an obvious move at all. And remember, in the game, both were very strong masters. And here I'm going to play against Noctie at rook 2. So that's approximately a 1900 level. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Noctie finds it. Alright, interesting. So here, Noctie actually missed the intermediate move knight e2 check. So capturing back with e-pawn is actually a mistake. So here, we should actually already have a large advantage. And that's because we are tempos ahead compared to the game variation. Because now we are hitting the f6 pawn and we are ready to jump in with the knight on the next move. Alright, d6, that's a reasonable move, planning to bring out the light squared bishop, but here I think we can just continue with our plan, jump in with the knight, and then we'll have some really nasty threats against the f6 pawn. Alright, and Noctie agrees, so it's a purple move, meaning it's an excellent move. Let's see. Alright, so black didn't really actually have a way to defend the f6 pawn. So here we should calculate for a bit. How should we proceed? Of course we should capture it. And yeah, I think taking with the knight is the only option that makes sense, because if we take with the bishop, we do threaten checkmate here with the knight, but black then can capture our knight. That wouldn't be good. And checking here first doesn't really make sense, because then the king can come to g7. So let's say we take with the knight, and the king has to move. So the question is, which square does the king move to? Let's see. Well, I don't think it makes any difference, because no matter if the king goes to h8 or g7, I'm gonna play knight g4 with a discovered check on the king. And against it, it's gonna be very difficult to defend, because king can't go back to g8, because then we'll have a beautiful checkmate here on h6. So I think the only option for black then is to block the check, but then we can pick up the bishop here on e6. I think that should be working. Let's see. All right, we give a check. Now g7 or h8. Let's see. All right, g7. And now just double check our calculations. Here I thought of going knight g4, unleashing the discovered attack or discovered check on the king. King has only one square, and that is g8, but that will lead to checkmate on knight h6. So when we play knight g4 check, then the only way for black is to block it, and they can play f6, but then the light square bishop is hanging, and then we will actually have a material advantage. So that looks promising. That looks promising. Let's see. And here I think Noctie realizes that she's in big trouble. Yep, f6 the only move. And we should just take the bishop, I think. Or are there anything stronger? Nope, not really. All right, cool. So now we have actually won back the material, but it's still unbalanced, of course. We have 3 minor pieces and a pawn against the queen. So generally speaking, if you just count material, a queen should be worth equal to 3 minor pieces. But then the evaluation will, of course, depend heavily on how the position looks. And in this case, white is, of course, much better, if not already winning. And that's because our 3 minor pieces are very active, while black's king... And that's because our 3 minor pieces are all very active, while at the same time, black's queen and rooks don't have clear targets in our camp. Okay, so black plays queen d2, attacking our bishop, but it got this orange brownish color, which means it's a mistake. So let's see here how we can punish it. Of course, we have the option to capture twice on f6. That will trade our 2 minors for a pawn and a rook. So that's materially an equal trade, but I don't think that's good here. We want to keep our minor pieces, keep the bishop here. So let's see. So we should, of course, protect our bishop and do it with tempo. So one idea is bishop c3. On c3, it will be protected by the b2 pawn, and at the same time, it will be attacking black's queen. That looks reasonable. And the other idea is going bishop e3. Because then, when the queen moves, we can play bishop h6 and skewering the rook. Perhaps that would be good. Then we'll win an exchange, and we will have a rook plus 2 minors for the queen. But on the other hand, our dark squared bishop is very strong, so are we even willing to swap it for an exchange? Okay, let's look further. Another alternative is rook a to d1, hitting the black queen and protecting the bishop through an x-ray. But then the queen will move somewhere, perhaps back. Then what do we do after? Well, I think it makes sense to grab this material. I mean, it's still an exchange for free. So yeah, let's go with that. All right, it's marked as a green move, so it's a good move. Happy to see. All right, black takes a pawn, and let's see, what do we do here? We can, of course, gain a tempo. So I think a really important theme to have in mind here is the so-called intermezzos, or in-between moves, or Zwischenzugs in German. So these moves are basically tempo-gaining moves that you can play before you play the obvious move. And here the obvious move for white is, of course, playing bishop h6, skewering the rook and winning the exchange. But here we have the opportunity to play rook a to c1 first, hitting the queen to gain a tempo, bring in another piece. But let's just double check if that's any good. Let's say we do it, then the queen can grab the e4 pawn. But let's see if we can make use of the rook then. Rook c7 check, king h8, only move. But then we can play bishop h6, threatening checkmate. Oh, but then black can take our bishop and we won't have checkmate. Well, but we do. This looks really interesting. Let's just think this through. Rook c1, queen takes e4. Rook c7 check, king h8, only move. Bishop h6, threatening bishop g7 checkmate. If queen takes, we play bishop g7 check anyways. King g8, only move, and then knight h6, checkmate. And if rook c1, queen takes e4, rook c7, king h8, bishop h6. If black plays rook g8 to guard the g7 square, then we can simply grab the f6 pawn with the knight, forking the queen here and the pawn on h7. Okay, I hope this works. Let's find out. We played this move. Nice. It's a blue move, so that's a great move. Looks promising. Let's see what black does. All right, black takes, and now rook c7 check. Only move. And now bishop h6. If queen takes, we check, king there, checkmate with the knight, right? And if we play there, if rook g8, of course we don't take the rook with our light squared bishop, we take the pawn with the knight, forking the queen and the h7 pawn, and black will be losing. Is this working? Nice, another blue move. Let's go. Black takes the bishop, but here, yeah, here we have a mate in two, right? All right, we're gonna do it. Bishop g7 check, king g8 only move, and now we have this nice mate with the knight. Knight h6 checkmate. Nice! Wow, that was a very fun position to play. And yeah, as we saw in the first move, when we captured the bishop, let me just pull that up for you. And let's take a look here at the first move. So I'm here playing against rook 2, 1900 level approximately. And here, black missed this very, very tricky and smart intermediate move, knight e2 check. And that was played in the game. So yeah, feel free to perhaps crank Noctie's strength up if you completed this position and if you want to challenge yourself. Because if you want to play against the response in the game, I think you need to have Noctie at least on 2000 level. Alright, so this week's position was really fun to play. And it was interesting that Noctie missed the in-between move, knight e2 check, that was played in the game. So I was playing against Noctie on rook 2, which corresponds to circa 1900 level. And yeah, it made a huge difference because we managed to get a few tempos up compared to the game. And in this case, it made a huge difference. So it was much easier for us, but nonetheless, a very good exercise for handling material imbalances and playing with active pieces and finding initiative creating moves. So yeah, hope you enjoy this as well. For me, these types of positional sacrifices are for me the most beautiful chess moves. And yeah, hope you liked it as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching and happy playing. Bye bye.